Cities are defined by their cultures. Those cultures could entail sports or business or certainly arts and entertainment. Oklahoma City is thriving in all of these areas, but who makes that all happen? This Town OKC explores the people behind the cultures, their origins, their motivations, their challenges, and their dreams. I'm Rick Allen Lippert. I've been in this town for over 50 years with a front row seat to seeing the culture grow from a dusty bus stop on the Southern Plains to a flourishing destination. Join me as we meet the folks behind the culture on This Town OKC. Preserving the oral histories of the people behind the cultures of Oklahoma City, Randy Kemp, advertising guy behind the scenes.
Why does that just sound odd to hear someone say? I don't know.
One might go so far as to say radio legend, but you haven't done that much radio in Oklahoma City.
I don't think a legend is way strong on any level for anything that I've ever done. But I did do radio here for 9 years.
Okay. What channel? What station?
KLTE, KLTE 101.9, KLTE 102 originally. And we had, in the 9 years that I worked there, we probably had like 20 different handles that we used because we could never figure out who we were. Identity crisis on the radio. But 9 years and enjoyed 90% of it.
That's pretty good.
Well, actually, yes, it is. I know a lot of people who've worked in small market stations, large market stations, and eventually corporate stations that have much lower percentages than that. And I have to say, in my opinion, speaking for myself, I feel like I've been blessed to get to do what I did, where I got to do it with the folks who worked with me and I worked with. So.
Well, I want to get to all of that.
Okay.
I do want to go back to when we first met, and frankly, I don't recall.
I don't either because Mindy and I were talking about this not long ago. It's like I've known you forever.
Forever.
Yeah. And
a good 40 years. Easily 40 years.
But I don't know when it started either. I can't either.
I remember hearing your name, I think, before I met you, but still, I don't recall when we first met.
Well, you were doing some cable access thing for the city.
Yes.
At one point, and I had seen you and had seen the stories and the stuff that you were doing there, so I knew who you were.
Okay.
Going way back, but when we first met, I have no idea.
Okay, so we got that out of the way.
I've just known you a long time.
How did you get to Oklahoma City, and when did that happen? Go back to your earliest days. You actually were raised in a radio family. I know your father was a GM.
Yes.
General manager.
Yes, and I'll see how short I can make this because I could make this story last hours.
We only have 45 minutes.
Okay, I'll hurry.
And less than that now.
Okay, thanks. It's always good to have a countdown clock. Our family actually started in radio in 1962. We moved to Tahlequah, Oklahoma. Mom was keeping books for the local radio station, KTLQ, which was owned by a couple named Galen and Elnora Gilbert, based out of Neosho, Missouri. They had 4 other radio stations, so a group of 5, plus the cable company in Neosho. They met the family. We all hit it off. They liked us, eventually hired Dad to get into radio and moved us to Neosho, Missouri, where he became station manager and then GM, and he was on the air. He had a midday shift. He did news. He did play-by-play for the high school and for the local community college, and just was going gangbusters with it. It was in August of 1963 when I walked into the radio station with him after sign-off one time, and I was 9 years old, not quite 10, walked in and was immediately hit with the smell of the station. It was day-old burned coffee, stale cigarette smoke, dust, vinyl records, and the ozone of tube electronics. Exactly. And I still to this day think that must be what heaven smells like.
Yes.
And it was just this, I was captivated. And since it was sign off and Dad was doing other stuff, I got to play in the production room. And that happened there in Neosho. We eventually moved to their sister station in Pawhuska, Oklahoma. It happened there too. And while we were there, I learned that you had to have, if you wanted to be on the radio, you had to have a third-class radio telephone operator's license with special endorsement.
Exactly.
If you wanted to talk. And I wanted to talk. So I would play in the production room or in the control room after sign-off and study for the test. And then in 1967, took the test in Kansas City, passed it, and got my third-class ticket.
Did you pass it on the first pass?
First pass, missed one question.
Oh, see, it took me 3 times taking that test.
Dad was he was proud of me, but upset with me because you could miss 5 and pass, and he missed 5 when he took his test in like 1963. And so here I was, I only missed 1, and we gigged each other over that for a long time. So I hung my ticket on my wall at my house.
I still have mine framed someplace.
Mine's somewhere. I have no idea where it is. Yeah. I have Dad's. I have his ticket.
Good.
But then one Saturday afternoon in April of 1968, Dad came into the room. By this time, Dad was managing the radio station in Bartlesville, KWON, and had a Saturday afternoon shift. And he said, hey, why don't you grab your ticket and let's go hang in the transmitter room? And I thought, whoa, because that's where it's supposed to be. So I went with him to the station. We hung it in the transmitter room. He was doing his shift. I was playing in the production room. Part of his shift that day was a Cardinal baseball game. And it was opening day of the 1968 season. They were playing the Cubs. I'll never forget it. And he came into the production room and he said, hey, listen, why don't you come in here into the control room, go ahead and sign into the log. You're legal now. You know how to read the transmitter stuff. So sign in the transmitter log, get all that stuff done. Here's the format for the Cardinal game. Why don't you sit down, take the controls. I'm going to go and get us a couple of hamburgers. I'll be back in a few minutes. Well, all right.
All right.
And suddenly this 14-and-a-half-year-old kid is sitting at the control board of the AM radio station in town and am the only one in the building because Dad has gone to get us some burgers. So I'm running the baseball game, running breaks. Around 2 o'clock, here comes the station ID. We didn't have anything recorded. So what do? Well, I clicked the mic and said, you're listening to Cardinal Baseball on KWON Bartlesville. Click.
And clicked it off.
Yep. Carried on with the game. Pretty soon, the game is getting to the end. Cardinals are winning 4-1. Then there's the post-game show and the locker room show, and the broadcast is about to end. And it's about 45 minutes left in the shift before 5 or 6 o'clock, whatever time it was. And I'm thinking, what am I going to do? Well, the records are right there. There's the record rotation format. I've got the log. Okay, let's play radio.
Which you have practiced over and over again.
And in my dreams at night. And so that's what I did until the end of the shift. About 15 minutes before the end of the shift came around, the guy who was going to follow Dad, a man named Don, came in the control room and he said, what are you doing here? Dad went to get burgers. I don't know. He's not back yet. I don't know where he's gone.
14-and-a-half-year-old kid.
Yeah.
Running the radio station.
Exactly. And so he said, I said to him, well, do you think, here, why don't you take it? Go ahead and take it. He said, no, you're doing fine. So I stayed on until 5 o'clock. We did a changeover. I stepped out of the control room. Dad pulls into the parking lot, came up the steps into the station, called me into his office and said, how would you like to do this every Saturday?
Wow.
And I said, yeah. He had been at the Thunderbird restaurant in downtown Bartlesville, sitting with his buddies, drinking coffee, listening to the game, seeing what I would do. That was my audition.
Live on the air.
Live on the air.
And that was the sound of your phone.
Yes, I'm going to turn that off now. That is a rookie mistake, man. On my part.
You know, I have a saying that you're not really a pro till you've made every mistake at least 3 times.
Well, that would have been the 3rd time today. So there you go.
So you passed the audition.
I passed the audition, thankfully. And for the next 2 years, I had a Saturday afternoon shift on the local AM radio station that none of my friends listened to, but their parents did. And I learned, I can't emphasize how much I learned in those 2 years just working 1 day a week. When I got my first check, which probably covered 2 weeks, I was making minimum wage, which in 1968 was $1.60.
Yeah.
Probably had 10 hours maybe on that check. So after taxes, maybe $13.
Right.
I was,
1968.
Exactly.
Oh, man.
Exactly. And I'm thinking, I am in tall cotton now. And it was, Dad included a note with the check that I've kept for many, many years. I think it's been lost in one of our myriads of moves. But there were a couple of really important things in there, one of which was a lesson that I will never, ever, ever forget, and I apply it, I think of it almost every day, and apply it to nearly everything I do now. And that is that, he said, always remember you were invited in with a click of a switch. And with a click of a switch, you can be invited out.
Nice. Very nice. Yeah.
Remember your audience. Remember who they are. Don't be stupid. I mean, that's, to me, what that's always said.
Sure.
And it taught me how to, it was the beginning stage of learning to communicate clearly and to be right about what you do, as right as you can. And I have never forgotten that.
It's a great lesson and a great note. For a dad to leave his son on his first paycheck.
He had another saying too, that for us, that for anyone who worked with him, that from now on your life will be governed by the sweep hand of your watch.
And he was right.
He was dead on right. 30 seconds, 60 seconds, 15 seconds, in those increments. And even today, I have a watch with a sweep hand because partly to remind me of him, but also to never forget that lesson. Time is important.
It really is. Mm-hmm. And you know this, once you're in radio, 30 seconds becomes ingrained in you, and you know what you can do. If you're busy doing something, you know how much time you have before 30 seconds is up.
That's exactly right. There's an internal clock that happens. You've got this internal countdown that you either hear or you see, or there is some sort of presence of it in you. And you know that, okay, I've got to wrap this up. Boom. Get it done.
Okay, moving on.
Yes, sir.
16 years old. You're now 2 years into this station. Where did you go then?
We moved from Bartlesville to Tulsa. It was my senior year in high school, and I was trying to get a job at another radio station. And so Dad was working at that time at KMOD-FM, which was not the KMOD that people in Tulsa would know now. It was a beautiful music station located on the top floor of the University Club Tower, had a beautiful space and this beautiful view of Tulsa and the Arkansas River, but their format was beautiful music.
Which in today's vernacular would be elevator music.
Yes. And they did not have the audience, certainly, that they have now. But they let me use the production room, and I put together a simulated air check to try to get a job. There were 2 stations in town where I really wanted to work because that was my jam.
Right.
KAKC at that time, 970 AM, and KELI 1430. And they were both top 40 stations. And so I put the tape together and took it to Lee Bailey, who was the program director at KAKC, or I mailed it to him, actually. And to my surprise, about a week later, I got a call from him.
And when you say air check, you're talking about a reel-to-reel tape.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. I put this together on reel-to-reel. And it was all fake, simulated with records out of my library because I didn't have a real job at the point. And I took it to him, and he said, he was very kind, and he said, listen, I think you've got real potential here, but we don't have an opening here. If it's okay with you, I'd like to share this tape with a colleague across town, Roger Borden at KRAV. At that time, KRAV their format was the Sketch Henderson format. Sketch Henderson had been the conductor of the Tonight Show Orchestra.
And with Jack Parr.
Correct. And I think maybe early Johnny Carson?
Yeah, early Carson, yeah.
Before Doc Severinsen came in. And at that point, Sketch Henderson had become the director of the Tulsa Philharmonic and was in Tulsa, as I recall. At any rate, he was the name that was on their format. And so it was kind of this mixture format. And I said, of course, sure. And to my surprise, sometime later, I got a call from Roger Borden. Said, we'd like to talk to you. And so I went to KRAV and talked to him and got the tour of the studio. And he said, listen, we don't have an opening right now, but we might in the future. And I've got your tape and I want to keep it. And I said, great. And I'm a senior in high school, so what else are you going to do? So gratefully, he kept the tape. And then it was some months later, I got another call from them, from the ownership group. They had an opening at their AM religious station in Sapulpa for a noon to 6 Sunday shift and wanted to know if I was interested. And one of the biggest errors in my career, I said no. Yeah, it was dumb. It was really dumb.
Right. You take the job.
Take the job. Come on, man. I mean, this is what you want to do.
Right.
You've got an opportunity here, and they've got other stations. This isn't the only station.
Yeah, and you're not going to be there forever.
No. So it was a bonehead move on my part.
Well, but you're, 18 at this
Probably,
point? 17, 18?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Just about to graduate high school. Wound up going to Tulsa Junior College, studying radio, TV, journalism, and production. And no job. Got through the first year into May of 1972. Dad gets a job now. Things had not gone well at KMOD. He now gets a job at a television station in Abilene, Texas. And so he's moved down there and getting ready to move all the family down there too at KTXS TV, K-Texas. He is the assistant manager and he is the 6 and 10 anchor, news anchor. Dad looked good on television. He had a great voice. I mean, he was the perfect guy for the job. So in May of that year, 72, we went down to trade cars so we could get his car that he had driven down there so we could get ready to move the family down there. And while there, I discovered that they were getting ready to lose their photographer, their staff photographer. And so I applied and got the job. And so when we moved down there in June, I became the station staff photographer and did that for 6 months until I went back to Tulsa to go to the spring 1973 semester. And during the time that I had done the photography thing, I was shooting 35 millimeter slides, 16 millimeter motion picture film. We had no electronic media at all.
It wasn't in those days.
I was learning how to run a camera. I had done some of their announce recording, daybook recording. So I'd done some of that, and I had filled in twice for the sportscaster when he had to be gone, and got a really great compliment from one of the local radio guys who said that I had excellent phrasing and they were well-written scripts, which I was just,
wow. Yeah.
This is great stuff because I enjoyed doing it and I loved doing it and I love sports. So all of that was really good. And so went back to school, no job, can't get a job up there either, still trying to get a job. And in April, as the semester was ending, got a call from the station manager, Dad's boss, who said, hey, listen, we're losing our sports guy. You want the job? And I said, yes. I did not make that same mistake twice.
Exactly.
So I took the job and moved back down to Abilene and became sports director. And with that came the weather gig. I did weather as well, and a farm show in the noon block.
You got to love small market TV.
Absolutely, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. At this time, I'm 19 years old, shoulder-length brown hair, in a semi-rural West Texas town, and which comes with its own layers of fun. As it turned out, I wound up doing weather in the farm show at noon, weather and sports at 6 and 10, Monday through Friday, and then shooting some weekend features, making minimum wage.
Minimum wage, of course.
Working a charted 40 hours a week, getting paid for 40 hours a week, and working 60 to 80.
Yeah.
And not caring because I loved what I was getting to learn how to do. Had a blast.
And how long did you have that job?
Did that until the fall of 1974. So that was about 16 months, 17 months, something along that line. And then I transitioned off of the air on to the production room and became a director, a videotape editor, film chain operator, all of that kind of stuff.
And for those who don't know that word, film chain, that's a 16 millimeter, typically maybe a 35 millimeter projector with a video camera aimed into the lens.
Correct.
So that films are shown directly into the camera and not onto a screen.
Right. And we had, the chain had two 16 millimeter projectors and one 35 millimeter slide carousel that we used for film commercials and slide tape commercials and those kinds of things.
Oh, yeah.
Very rudimentary. And I learned how to do all that stuff. And I did that. At the same time that I was doing that, I also had a friend who was programming a local FM station who needed some help, and we'd become friends. And so I wound up helping him on the FM. And so there for a period of time, I was working. In fact, at one point I was doing the morning show on the FM and then working an afternoon to night shift at the TV station.
Yeah.
It was a blast.
Oh, yeah.
It was the best of both worlds.
Living the dream.
Yes. Worked for an FM station. This FM station, at the time I was there, did not have a true radio console for stereo FM. It was a stereo board that was very early. It was cobbled together. And so for the microphone, control room mic, there were two microphones, and you had to speak between them if you wanted to be in the middle of the room. So if you turned your head, you would be walking across somebody's stereo field, and it was, you had to learn about stuff like that.
Wow.
Yeah, had a blast, though. Learned a lot. Did that until April of 76. A friend of mine in Odessa, Texas, offered me a job at their television station. He and I had worked together in Abilene, and he had moved on. He had become their production director and needed some help on the floor crew and on his directorial and editing staff, and hired me. And so we moved to Odessa, Texas at that point. That was April of 76. And I did that solely until the spring of 77 when, and this is very small market kind of thing that just happens, but I blew an engine in a car and had to replace the engine, but had no money. So I had to get a second job. And I had a friend at one of the local radio stations who hired me to work 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. on their top 40 station. And I did that from March of 77 until the fall when I decided to go full-time radio.
Okay. Giving up TV.
Yeah, I gave up the TV side because, I think it's because I wanted one job, and the single job on radio was actually going to pay better, and which was kind of a surprise. But I had been signing on the TV station at 5:30 in the morning and working till 3 p.m., getting maybe a nap, maybe something to eat, and then going to the radio station by 8 p.m. for a 2-hour production shift before I was on the air from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. But I was on adrenaline.
Sure.
And had just an amazing time and learning so much along the way that you don't realize you're learning.
Exactly.
And it comes up later when you get down the road a little bit and you realize that you're going into automatic mode about something to accomplish a task that you learn and you realize that's where I learned it because I had to, because of either timing or something in the career that, something in my work life that I had to accomplish something, and I learned how to do it, and now I'm just applying it.
So where next?
I worked at that radio station until April of '79. I had gotten a call from the owner of the previous FM station in Abilene. They had changed frequencies, lost their program director, wanted me to come and program the station. So I went back to Abilene and programmed that station. I learned a lot there too. I'd never been a real program director before. And so I was the guy putting together all the promotions and the formatting, music formatting, and the air staff, and trying to manage all of that stuff. In Odessa, we had worked really hard and had made that station #1 in the market, in the combined Odessa-Midland market. Huge market. I think it's number 129 on the Arbitron list or whatever it is now.
It's in the top 150.
Yeah. But I've gotten to where I don't pay attention to the market size numbers anymore, because I really believe, going back to Dad's statement about the click of a switch, that every listener is important, and it doesn't matter how many. You've got to pay attention to who they are and meet the needs of the audience. And we learned how to do that. And so we'd made the station #1, and I go back into Abilene in my first air staff meeting. I'm just prancing like I've got this big head. I've worked for a #1 radio station, guys, and I'm telling you, there's nothing like it. And so I'm going to take our station. If you'll stay with me, I'm going to take our station, ranked #7 out of 6 stations in this market. Yeah, we were getting beat by a Dallas station. Even though we're #7, we're going to be #1 in the next book, or I'll resign. And they're like, whoa, well, all right. And we all dug in, and we worked our tails off, and we did some amazing stuff and some fun stuff. And when the book came out, we were #3.
Well,
but we were #3, and I said we would be #1. So I am just, I've got my tail between my legs, and I'm thinking, okay, what am I going to do? So I went into my office, and I typed up a resignation letter, and I took it to the owner of the station. And I handed it to him, and he said, "What's this?" I said, "You need to read it." So he read the letter, and that I was resigning and why I was resigning, and he'd known about that whole #1 thing. And he said, "Well, sit down for a second." And he folded up the letter, and he was a pipe smoker, and he leaned back in his desk, his chair, and put his feet on his desk and puffing on his pipe. And he said, "Where were we when you got here?" I said, "Well, we were down the list." He said, "We were #7 out of 6. I said, "Yeah." He said, "Where are we now?" I said, #3. He said, "Does your check clear? Are you okay? Are you wanting money? Are you wanting more money or anything?" And I said, "Well, no, it's not that. It's just I made a promise to these guys." He said, "I'll tell you what." He folded up the letter and he stuck it in the top drawer of his desk. He said, "Let's give it another year and see what happens." I said, "Okay." And he called the meeting of the air staff meeting, and explained all of that, and they were all good, and we carried on for a while. That was in 1980. In the fall of '80, I started getting, I'm sorry, that's not true. It was the spring of '81. Spring of '81, I started getting calls from a radio station in Oklahoma City that had just changed formats. They were looking for an afternoon guy. I had been recommended to them by one of their friends who was part of our competition across town. And Joe, who was calling me from the station here, said, "They want you out of town," is the thing, which to me was a huge compliment. But he said,
"Oh yeah, the competition was getting you a better job."
They wanted me out of town. So and I took that as a great compliment. And so we began to talk, and eventually, through discussions with family and with them, came to an agreement. They flew me up here Mother's Day weekend of 1981, and put me up downtown at the Sheridan Century Center and showed me the town. Yeah.
The Sheridan was still kind of clean back then.
It was a nice hotel then.
Yeah.
It was very nice. And I met the owner, Ken Dow, who was and is one of my radio heroes to this very day. He had the #1 show in Dallas for decades on KLIF, the Ken and Granny Show. And he was one of my radio idols. And so getting to work with him was just going to be great. And that was one of the reasons why I really wanted the job. And so I wound up taking the job, moved here, and my first day on the air here was June 1st of 1981. The plan at that time, and Ken
and was this K-Lite?
Yes, this was K-Lite. And the plan, I talked it over with Ken, and the plan was he was going to help me hone skills to be a big market air personality, because he had been one of the best. In fact, I think he's in the Texas Radio Hall of Fame. I mean, he's a big guy.
He's somebody.
He is a somebody, and one of the nicest guys on the planet. He was going to help me hone those skills, and then in 2 or 3 years, help me transition to Dallas. That was my dream market. But life intervened, and pretty soon I was married. We had a daughter at the time. Pretty soon we had a son, and pretty soon they were starting school. And things change when that happens.
Oh, yeah.
And so my 2-year, 3-year stint in Oklahoma City has now turned into 44 years. I've been here 44 years. And I can't imagine being anywhere else.
It's a great town.
And it keeps getting greater.
Yes.
That's one of the best things about Oklahoma City. When they moved me up here in 81 and they put me up at the Sheridan for a week while I tried to find housing for us, the boom was going on. Downtown was filling up with people. You could physically feel it on a work day in the morning as people came into town, and you could feel the city exhale at the end of a business day downtown. And it was it was captivating. And when you at that time, the interstate view of Oklahoma City was not good. And if you got off the interstate into downtown and into some of the other areas of town, the Village and around Nichols Hills and down even on the south side of Oklahoma City, and get out away from what you see just on the interstate, even then it was a vibrant town. It was just kind of hidden. To see it grow from that through the bust and through the bombing, and then with maps helping to revitalize everything in Oklahoma City, and now a big league city with the Thunder, and having their phenomenal run this particular season, and the baseball stadium, and just everything that's going on here. Oklahoma City, in my opinion, has got to be one of the shining jewels in the country. I love the city.
There's no place I'd rather be.
No, I am stuck here. I love this place.
Even with all its faults, I still would prefer to be here.
You know, show me any city that doesn't have faults.
Exactly.
There's no place that's perfect. Eden doesn't exist anymore on this planet. And I love that I am here, that my life is here, that most of my family is here. And this is, there's no place I'd rather be.
So your time at K-Lite came to an end. What caused that, if you want to go into that, and how did you get into independent production?
In probably late 89 and early 90, the station had gone through a couple of ownership changes. Ken had sold the station on my 3rd year anniversary, actually, sold the station to another group that was run. Mel Wheeler Incorporated owned the station. Leonard Wheeler was our GM, great guy. We worked very hard, made a transition to a new studio location, and through various format changes and those kinds of things, and great people working with. But then when they sold to a company called Intercom, who came in and told us that They wanted to be as big as Clear Channel. They wanted to be bigger than Clear Channel. They wanted to be a mega ownership group. You know, we were all trying to buy into what they were selling and trying to work really, really hard. But corporate, in my personal opinion, corporate broadcasting ain't where it's at.
Right.
In fact, it's where it definitely isn't. I'm not a fan. The FCC had gone through some ownership rule changes, which allowed for these things to happen.
Yes.
Some deregulation did need to happen, but that was not part of it. That went way too far. And now there are a limited number of large corporations that actually control the broadcast signals in this country for every format, every news station, regardless of its political bent. And that's wrong.
I agree.
I'm a big believer in local ownership of broadcast stations. And I learned, part of my learning process through all of this, part of the result has been that as much as I longed to be in a big market and a national kind of thing, all broadcasting, indeed all advertising, really, when you boil it down, is local.
Yep.
It's all local.
Yeah.
So it's whoever's on the microphone at a radio or a television station trying to communicate with whoever that one viewer or listener is sitting in front of a television or near a radio. And they've got to make that connection and communicate. They've been invited in with that click of a switch.
Exactly.
And so if they can connect and communicate, it's a one-to-one. It's very local. It's not one to the masses. And that was a huge lesson to learn, but I'm grateful that I learned it. And through the corporate, what's the right word? I started to say shenanigans. I don't think that's, that comes to mind, but I'm not sure that's accurate. Through whatever corporate does, through corporate dealings, let's say that, I decided corporate was not where I needed to be. In the meantime, during my career, I had begun to do some voiceover at some local studios for commercial work and loved doing it. It was great. And it was side money, and it was kind of it was a wonderful thing.
It's good money if you can get it.
It sure is. And there was one studio in town where I had done quite a bit, and they were losing their second engineer and wanted to know if I wanted to do something part-time. And I said, absolutely. And I went to the GM of the station at the time, a guy named Wayne Walker, who was a great guy. And we talked about it. He said, yeah, that's fine. You can do that because your shift starts at noon. As long as you're here by noon, you're good. So I began doing part-time production at Esprit Communications here in Oklahoma City for the man who owned the studio was Drew Barlow, who was a very popular voice in town, did a lot of custom music work and some really creative audio production. And it was a small little two-man shop with a studio manager. Rita Myers was our studio manager. And so I went to work there and began to learn the studio side part-time. And then the corporate stuff just kind of came to a head for me. And
I will say that may be where I first met you.
Maybe.
Because I did do a project at Esprit one time. I forget what the project was, but I remember being there and meeting Drew.
That could very well be. Maybe that is where we met. I'd met your lovely wife, Gwen, way before then, because she had been to the studio to actually voice some stuff that I engineered in the production room at the radio station.
Okay.
So I knew Gwen just from that encounter. Right. So we may have met there. But the corporate radio thing just kind of came to a head for me, and I'd had all of that I could take for a number of reasons. And as that was happening, Rita, our studio manager, took me to lunch, and we went to Mamacita's. So we went to lunch, and she said, we want to offer you a full-time job if you're willing. And I said, you have no idea how perfect this timing is. And so we talked through it, and I wound up taking a full-time job at Esprit and left radio in May of 1990 and went full-time production that very next week.
So 35 years now, you've been independent, basically independent production.
Worked for Esprit for 7 years, and then was fortunate enough to be able to hang out my own shingle and and do work. And I've had my own studio since officially since November of 1997. So we just passed, what is that? We just passed 27 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
The bulk of the work that RK1 Studios does is, would you say, advertising?
Yes, the bulk of it is advertising. But the business has changed so much that I think for an independent studio, if we're not versatile enough to be able to branch out and meet other needs in that area, you could wither up and die. And we're trying really hard not to do that.
Exactly.
So we still do a lot of advertising work. We do also doing podcasts, a lot of podcast recording and editing. We're doing some audiobooks. I think we have 6 audiobooks currently on Audible that we recorded for the author. I'm working on another one now. There are 2 podcasts that I'm working on and editing. My son works with me and has worked with me for almost 20 years now, which has just been, I can't tell you what a blessing that's been.
I'm sure.
And he is a wonderful editor and a voice talent and a musician. And so he's done a lot of custom music for us and that kind of stuff too.
And you've continued to do a lot of, I'll say, PA announcing. You were the voice of the Dodgers, Red Hawks.
Well, yeah. I come from a baseball family, so baseball is that's my wheelhouse. I love baseball. And in 1996, a friend of mine, David Patterson, had been doing the public address for the 89ers and just was looking for a backup. And so I backed him up in the 96 season and again in 97. When the team moved to the ballpark downtown in 98 and became the Red Hawks, I became the lead guy and did that for 8 years downtown in the Bricktown ballpark and just had a blast. It was just such fun. My schedule got crazy. I had to drop that gig. I kind of wish I'd been able to stick that one out. And then in the meantime, one of the guys that I had worked down there with had become an assistant athletic director for sponsorship sales at University of Central Oklahoma. And they needed a football guy. And I'd never done football, and they took a chance on me. And so I believe it was the 2014 or 15 season I started doing football at UCO and made lots of mistakes, but learned a lot and just had a blast. And eventually also did some volleyball and basketball. Eventually got to do some softball, which most people think is exactly like baseball, but it's not. It's a different animal. But got to do some of that and also some UCO baseball. In 2016, I don't know why, but by this time, our professional team is the Dodgers. And they had, for at least that season, needed a PA guy for the entire season. They hired me to do it, and I came back in to do the Dodgers. But I had a really difficult time saying Dodgers, because they were the Red Hawks to me. and even though they were wearing blue and they weren't associated with the Texas Rangers anymore, and they were the Dodgers team, and they were owned by the Dodgers and all of that stuff, and I had scripts in front of me, sometimes you hit that automatic mode and Red Hawks would fall out of my face into the microphone. Occasionally, you'd hear people chuckle about it. You'd hear the crowd chuckle occasionally, and then I'd correct it and move on. But it took me half a season to stop saying Red Hawks. So I think it's probably safe to say they're not going to have me back to do the Comets. I think that it's probably safe to say, but
you never know.
Well, I love baseball. I love our local team. I want them to succeed, but I had a really tough time with that one. And so I chalked that up to just getting old.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the projects that we have done together through Carpenter Square Theatre.
Yeah.
And just to remind everybody, we're recording this podcast in the rehearsal studio at Carpenter Square Theatre. It's sponsor of this podcast.
It's an amazing space.
Thank you. during COVID, when no one was performing live anywhere in theaters anyway, you had the space near downtown, and Rhonda Clark assembled actors and scripts, and we recreated old-time radio shows.
Wasn't that a blast?
It was, with video cameras.
Yes.
So with actors in costumes, your retro microphones. That was so much fun.
We had a blast with that. And don't they still live on YouTube?
They're on YouTube, on the Carpenter Square Theatre YouTube channel. I think there are a dozen of those old shows.
And so if someone wanted to go back and see that stuff, you could see the performances, some wonderful visual performances with radio scripts.
Yes.
Just as if you're part of a studio audience. And you could hear all the mistakes we made too, and see camera moves and the jerky camera moves and missed audio cues and all that stuff, which is, to me, part of the charm of what we were trying to do, because, we were learning as we went. But
it was
magic.
It was. I think we're simpatico in that it brought together our love of radio and television.
Yes.
Live television.
Yes. And theater.
And theater.
And theater, because it was all three media kind of collected together, and we got to do it all in one fell swoop, and it was just a blast.
And we did it 2 nights in a row, live, on a Friday night and a Saturday night. On some of the recordings on YouTube, there's only one performance.
Well, technical difficulties do arise from time to time.
They do.
Even in the digital age, especially in the digital age.
That was so much fun.
Yeah. It was a lot of fun.
And nobody made a dime off of it.
No, we didn't make any money. But for us, we had, in fact, just before COVID hit, we had moved to that space near downtown, and it was like, we're finally down here where the cool kids are, and then boom, COVID, and everybody vanishes, and like, where'd everybody go?
Yeah.
So we were trying to figure out, what do we do? And we've got all this space, so let's do something. And so to get to do this with you guys, with Carpenter Square, and it was really kind of an ensemble cast that
it really was.
Wanda had collected.
Yes.
And all just wonderful supreme actors with wonderful voices. It was just a wonderful time, and I would encourage anybody to go take a look at those videos.
And Matt did all the pre-recorded sound effects and music.
Right, my son
direction.
Matt.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, it was wonderful.
Yeah, and I got to run one of the cameras again.
Yeah,
that was fun. And punching around and trying to figure out, okay, how do we stream this? It's not like we're on channel 52 or something.
I just flashed back to I would cue you to switch cameras by tapping you on the shoulder with a yardstick.
Yeah, with a stick. Yeah. Change cameras. Yeah, it was very rudimentary, but in thinking about that, on more than one occasion, I'm flashing back to K Texas, which was a small studio. A small TV station in Abilene, Texas, that only had one camera. And so we had to figure stuff out to make it creative and visual and all that kind of stuff then. But I would flash back to those times and think about, this is like being in the infancy of TV again. And how cool is this?
Yeah.
Yeah, we had fun.
Okay, so what do you see the future of RK1 Productions?
Well, I'm currently editing an audiobook now, 2 podcasts, still doing some broadcast production. We've scaled back tremendously. We no longer have our downtown location. But all of that to say, I don't want to retire. I love what I get to do. And,
sure.
And the clients that still trust me with their work. And I have to say I've been very blessed in this way too. My clients aren't just clients. They're friends, not just colleagues, but people that, I'd go to lunch with you folks. Let's go to dinner. We can hang. You're looking for a cup of coffee? Come on by. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
And they're just dear friends. And we know about each other's kids and families and all that kind of stuff. And that to me is the relationships that have come in the 44 years I've been in this town are paramount to me. And so anything I can do to maintain those relationships, grow new ones, grow those closer and tighter, and still do some fun, quality audio work, I'm happy to do. So we're trying to figure out as we go forward, what is the next step? What do we need to do? Technology has changed our industry in exponential ways and is still changing at an exponential rate. And it's hard to know what just happened 15 minutes ago as opposed to what's going to happen in a day and a half. Yeah, you just don't know.
I have borrowed a line from Bob Dotson, one of my personal heroes.
He's great.
Who said, "Everything I learned on is now in a museum."
Well, that's true because before we moved, I had tons of old gear that nobody wanted, nobody could fix. There was no place to put it, and sadly had to let it go.
Oh.
And it's just like letting go of an old friend, saying goodbye. And literally, there were several important pieces of gear that went into a dumpster to which I said goodbye.
Yeah.
And I had a moment.
Yeah, sure.
With some of that stuff. So not to say that all change is bad, but I'm not sure all change is exactly necessary. But it is inevitable. And so you just kind of have to roll with the punches. And so as we do that, we're just trying to figure out what is next.
Randy Kemp, thank you so much.
Oh, you're
I've
welcome.
been dreaming of the time I could sit down and record your story. I apologize for not having a video camera for this, but at least I have it on audio.
I think audio can paint better pictures sometimes than video.
So this has been This Town OKC. I'm Rick Allen Lippert. I want to thank Carpenter Square Theatre for sponsoring the podcast and Fred O. Bishop for his post-production. This has been a Lippert Media production.